So this is the paper we've been working through, February, March 2018, paper 42, the short answer questions. And we had a look at question 6, revision of what chemical digestion is, and then looking at an enzyme experiment. So there was 4 different test tubes, and in each test tube was different things. And in the last question, we worked through an explanation for test tubes 1, 2, and 3. Why did we get the results that we got there? So we had egg white and pepsin, egg white, pepsin, and hydrochloric acid, egg white, boiled pepsin, and hydrochloric acid. So the idea was we had enzyme activity in test tube 1, but not really because it wasn't at the optimum pH. Test tube 2 was brilliant because the pepsin was at its optimum pH. Test tube 3, we didn't get anything at all because our pepsin was boiled and therefore it was denatured. Now, test tube 4 is the one we'll be heading today. So here we explained the results for 1, 2, and 3. Part 2 asks us to explain the purpose of test tube 4. So if we have a look again at test tube 4 is egg white solution and hydrochloric acid. There is no pepsin in test tube 4. And that's what's really important. So we've taken out the enzyme. So here we can see, well, is it just the hydrochloric acid that's actually digesting the pepsin? Or is there something more interesting going on? And if we look at the results for test tube 4, we see that absolutely nothing happens. It was cloudy at the beginning and it's cloudy at the end. There's no digestion. So test tube 4, the purpose of test tube 4 is to give us our control experiment. We've removed our active ingredient. And we see here there's 2 marks for this question. So we don't just want to say control. That would only be 1 mark. So what is it controlling? It's demonstrating that pepsin is what's doing the digestion, not the acid. Then we move a little bit on from the questions directly pertaining to the experiment, because part 3 asks us to state the name of the organ in the body that produces pepsin. Where are we digesting proteins with a very high concentration of acid? It's in the stomach. So simply state the name, we're just going to put stomach. The very last question in this paper is 6 part C. Maltase is another digestive enzyme. Describe the action of maltase and state where it acts in the alimentary canal. So we've got 2 things that we must answer here. What does maltase do and where does it do it? So they asked us to describe first, so let's do that. What does it do? Maltase is all about breaking maltose into glucose. Remember, we go from starch to maltose to glucose. Maltase acts on maltose. It's really nice when you're working with enzymes and you find those links because it can help you very much in order to remember who goes with what. So maltase digests maltose to form glucose molecules. Where? It's in the small intestine, but in a particular place in that small intestine, it's on the membrane of the epithelial lining, because it's all about, okay, we're going to break that maltose into glucose, but then we need to get into the body as quickly and efficiently as possible. So maltase acts at the membrane of the epithelial lining of the small intestine. So it's really important as you go through all of these that you answer each question specifically. Past paper questions are fantastic practice when you're working on your final stages of revision. They're also going to throw all the topics mixed up at you, which is brilliant to get your mind bouncing from one thing to another. Whenever we are considering diet, particularly of humans at this point, it is important to understand it in terms of the requirements of the body. So in terms of the nutritional value of the diet and in terms of the energy produced. So if we think first in terms of energy, then we need to consider something called the basal metabolism. So remember that the metabolism is the reactions, and basal, we can say it's at the base, the basics. Okay, so your body is always doing things. Even when you're fast asleep, your body's still functioning. We have things happening like circulation. Okay? In order for your blood to circulate, your heart must pump. In order for your heart to pump, we need muscular contraction. Muscular contraction requires energy. So circulation, breathing, definitely muscle contractions there. Okay? We have to maintain body temperature. Talk about that when we talk about homeostasis. Our brain function needs to keep going. All our cells must keep existing even when there's nothing actively going on. Okay, there's all sorts of essential chemical, let's just write that nicely. Essential chemical processes. Things like ultrafiltration. Okay, all sorts of chemical processes that must go on all the time just to keep a person alive. So this is what we refer to as the basal metabolism, the basic energy that's required to keep the body going. Obviously then, if we increase the energy expenditure, we start talking, we start blinking now, we're awake, or we start walking, we start running, all of those sorts of things increase then the energy required. Because as soon as we're doing more, we're using more energy. And therefore, we need to adjust diet in order to account for that. If we think about where's this energy coming from, we can get energy from both carbohydrates and fats. But it's quite a bit different in terms of how much they give us. When we talk about carbohydrates, let's say we're going to use 1 gram of carbohydrate. Okay? That's going to give 16 kilojoules of energy, or 16,000 joules. Just kilojoules is easier to use because it's a shorter meter number. If you look at fats though, 1 gram, so the equivalent weight of fat would give 37 kilojoules of energy. So 37,000 joules. That's over double 16. 16 plus 16 is 32. It's another 5 kilojoules on top of that in terms of energy from fats rather than carbohydrates. So you can see that fats are a much bigger source of energy than carbohydrates per unit weight. Okay, so what happens then if we don't get this balance right? Well, our carbohydrate, now I can't spell carbohydrate. Carbohydrate, spelling is important, particularly for technical terms. We can do 2 things. One is that we can actually go through respiration, and that then produces energy. Or if we have excess, this then gets stored. So carbohydrates are stored as glycogen in the liver, whereas our fats are stored as fats. We can either put them below the skin or in the abdomen. Ooh, doesn't quite fit. There we go. So this is why we talk about it being important to understand what the energy requirements of a person are, because in order to get the right level of energy intake, you have to understand what the expenditure is. So we've got this basal expenditure, okay? What then takes it on? And it's really important that you always bear in mind that this is a seriously complex process. Balancing diet and energy requirements is really complex and is highly individual. You've probably heard talk about people having different metabolisms. So the energy used for your basal metabolism will be different to the energy of me or the person next to you. It's all very individual because we all have very unique and individual bodies. So what we do when we're looking at something like this is we have to understand, okay, there is a basic and there are factors that can affect it, but we're not going to know the details as in a case by case. So we can make generalizations at broad scales, but then if we look at individuals and we try to fit them into those generalizations, it can be a lot more of a challenge. So what are those broad generalizations that we work with at IG Bio's level? Okay, our major categories. To consider. We are talking here about things like age. We are talking about gender. We are talking about activity level. And we are talking about pregnancy. And we are talking about lactation. So each of these is a broad group. So we could say that you are most likely younger than me, and so your diet and energy requirements are different to mine. But if we said, okay, so the age group of 30 to 40, their general diet and energy requirements are X, Y, Z, and then we look at me and it's like, do I really fit? So this is what we're saying is that at a broad scale, we can make generalizations. But for the individual, they don't always fit into the generalization because a generalization is a generalization. And some generalizations are far broader than others. So let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail in what we're considering. So we'll split up so that we can see everything together. So we have age. And now we're also not just going to look at energy, we're also going to look at diet. So aspects of the diet. Now the biggest thing about age is growth rate. Are you growing or not? So a baby, a toddler, a child, a teenager, an adult, we're going to have a whole lot of different growth rates going on. And growth, of course, requires energy and nutrients. So it's that balancing of those energy and nutrients are going to be quite different at different ages. So here we are considering change in growth rate. We are interested not only in the energy required, but also the nutrition. Calcium and vitamin D. Are we at a stage of growth where bone formation is a big thing? Okay, all of these sorts of things, all of these complex factors are going to feed in. Generally, when it comes to amount of food, you'll find that child is going to eat a smaller amount than an adult, they are a smaller person. However, if you look at the amount of food that they eat divided by their body weight, you'll see that they are eating more per unit mass. Okay, so the technical way for this, what we would say, under 12 years, children require more food per unit mass than adults. So what we're saying is if we added up the weight of the food that the child eats, over the child body weight, what we would find is that this is larger than what the adult eats divided by their body weight. So although it might look that the child has less on their plate, this ratio of amount consumed to body weight is much higher than for the adult. And again, we're talking in this generalized idea of these children having a higher growth rate and needing more energy and nutrition. So the next one to consider was gender or sex of a person. Here we have a difference between male and female. Okay, so you often hear things about comparisons between metabolism between male and female. And we're going for a major generalization here, but this is what you learn at IG Biology, is that generally females have a lower body mass. So we're even going to put in here, generally, females have a lower body mass. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that you're all thinking of a whole lot of exceptions to this generalization. So again, we're reiterating that point of we can make a generalization, but fitting individuals into a generalization is a whole different story. But what does it mean in terms of energy requirements? If a person of any sex has a lower body mass, they have a lower energy requirement. So, lower body mass leads to lower energy requirements. And this is one of those things where we're keeping other things constant. So we wouldn't be comparing a 6-year-old female with a 25-year-old male, because then we have the impact of age as well. This is now a 6-year-old female against a 6-year-old male. So we're keeping all of our other things constant so that we're looking at this generalization of sex. Activity level, I'm hoping that's a nice big obvious one. People who are more active are going to need more energy. And this one actually has an incredibly strong impact. Because that activity level directly relates to the energy that is used. So if we were comparing an athlete, a top athlete, like an Olympic athlete, versus a normal person who works in an office, okay, their energy levels are going to be dramatically different. So it doesn't matter which way around we have the sex story, male and female. It doesn't matter which way around we have ages, older and younger. This activity level and the demands of energy from the activity level is going to trump everything. So more activity, higher energy requirements. The last two, we're sort of going to put them together because they do often, well, they do come together and they are very linked as well. Pregnancy and lactation. So when it comes to pregnancy, the big deals are energy and proteins and minerals. I mean, it's energy and it's proteins. We've got this whole developing embryo, the developing fetus, and the mother's diet has to provide everything for that development. So in particular here, we're talking energy and protein demands. For the growth requirements. Of the embryo, and then at later stages, the fetus. During lactation, so now after birth, if the mother is breastfeeding, she's also producing milk, and that is the baby's full diet. So that milk has to have all of the nutrients that baby is going to require. That milk must provide a balanced diet. So proteins, minerals, nutrients, vitamins, all of this must be in. So it's important that the mother adjusts her diet. So her metabolism will adjust so that she can produce the milk, but she must also bear in mind her diet so that she actually has enough of these nutrients to pass on to the baby. So again, if we were to compare to 30-year-old women, then now we've got to consider, okay, activity level, age is constant, sex is constant, but now pregnancy versus non-pregnancy. So it's very much a story of details, a story of complexities, and it's really important that you understand that these are broad generalizations. This is not saying that you are this age, you are this sex, and you are this activity level, and therefore ... It's a broad guideline, okay, of what impacts on energy and diet requirements and what must be borne in mind when it comes to this sort of thing, and the understanding of that impact of how a diet is balanced and things that can affect changes in ways which we balance that diet. If you are an Olympic athlete and then you go on holiday for 6 weeks and then you're not exercising at the same rate, you would have to adjust your diet because your use of the energy is going to be different to when you're in extreme training. So there's so many layers and so many different things to consider that it's a very complex situation. And we boil it down, we have these broad generalizations, and this is then what we're understanding in terms of things to bear in mind, but there's a whole lot more detail than that.